Quick introduction of myself. I'm formerly a Deloitte management strategy consultant, working in media and technology in sort of Fortune 500, 100 companies prior to acquiring PMP a couple years ago. I'm the son of a lawyer and a judge. I grew up in a law family. My sister's a former prosecutor, but I have this kind of like inclination towards media and creativity, and so I've had an opportunity to merge those things in PMP, where we get to do marketing services for law firms. A bit about PMP, we started a little over 20 years ago, actually. It was started by John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan, and it really started as like a lead referral network. In around 2007, it became an advertising agency for primarily personal injury attorneys across the country. As Morgan & Morgan grew, they became competitive with a lot of PMP's clients. Enter me and my partners. We acquired PMP from John and his partner in 2022. And part of the rationale is because I think there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in this industry. I think just leveraging the conversation just now, it's like how many years ago were there 10 years ago, how many COOs on a percentage basis were there in law firms? There's clearly professionalization of the industry and a lot of macro trends that are kind of like reshaping things that make things difficult in some ways, but also really exciting and opportunistic in other ways. At PMP, we provide agency of record type services, doing advertising from out of home, billboards, bus ads, linear TV, paid social, paid search, etc. We also do websites and SEO. So we really position ourselves to be an outsourced marketing department for law firms. So we can either kind of be the marketing department or we augment the marketing department of our clients. And here's a handful of clients that we represent across the country and even in Canada. But today, as I mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about this white paper that we wrote. And what I've been trying to do is sort of take the mentality that we had at Deloitte for sort of Fortune 500 or 100 clients and sort of analyzing markets and advising executives and apply that to this market and like our clients. And so we do a lot of research projects that kind of find their way into these white papers. One such last year was a sort of detailed analysis of the client journey following a car accident, but hiring an attorney, what are the decision patterns individuals take. And then this most recent one is about the nature of competition in the, particularly the personal injury space. Our sense has been that it's increasingly competitive. Anecdotally, it's like if you're advertising on TV in the early 2000s and 2010s, there was like low-hanging fruit. And a lot of firms got really successful by doing that, and success breeds competition, so other firms are sort of mimicking that. And in parallel, we're seeing like fragmentation of platforms, like linear broadcast TV is not the monolithic media source it once was. You have Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Google, and now you've got emerging AI platforms like ChatGPT, etc. And it creates a much more competitive environment. And meanwhile, we've seen observed behavior of personal injury attorneys and consumer law attorneys in general, maybe partaking in like self-destructive or self-defeating decision-making and actions sort of in the spirit of competing against rivals. And so this observation took us to analyze the market. We had interviews with a bunch of academics, consumed a lot of books about strategy and market dynamics and things of that nature. We leveraged Michael Porter's 5 Forces framework. Michael Porter is a famous strategist and professor from Harvard Business School. And Porter's 5 Forces allows you to sort of understand the competitive dynamics of a given market. And that includes the threat of new entrants, competition from rivalries, bargaining power of buyers, bargaining power of suppliers, and also threat of substitutes. In this, we really think about competitive rivalries and new entrants to really shape the field of play for our clients, which obviously has tie-ins to marketing. And so with this, we found like there's more people fighting sort of for the same cases to represent the same group of people. The relative supply of cases, if you will, is somewhat fixed. Like there's only so many injured persons, thankfully, every year, but you've got more people going after those. And so that creates a supply and demand challenge and forces law firms to just think more strategically about how they navigate their own competitive environments. And many such competitive environments are local in nature. And so that's a factor that we take into this as well. So, we thought it feels like it's more competitive, but we need to kind of like prove that it is. And so we did some analysis on our proprietary research, and what we saw on Google, the bid environment increased with competitors 18% year over year, just from 23 to 2024. So that's 18% increase in the markets where we're monitoring with our clients. More participants in those auction environments for Google paid search. We also looked at broadcast TV available data through Vivix. From 2014 compared to 2024, what we saw was that there was a reduction in number of advertisers. There were about 3,300 advertisers in the legal vertical on broadcast TV in 2014 compared to 2,300 roughly in 2024. So fewer advertising in broadcast TV. The amount of money though is roughly just shy of $500 million in 2014 compared to almost $700 million in 2024. So there's more money, fewer advertisers on a platform, meanwhile, that is experiencing significant decline in viewership as well. So we see these sort of like empirical points of evidence to show that there's increasing competition from a marketing standpoint. But then there are also other macroeconomic factors where you have different financing instruments, where it's either debt-like loans that allow people to finance growth in their firms, or with alternative business structures, equity-like instruments that allow people to finance growth. And so you see an emergence of more national and regional players, which sort of clouds the competitive territory. You're also seeing, in the market in general, the retirement of baby boomers as a large generation. Sometimes managing partners are not retiring, which creates a barrier for, call it millennial-aged attorneys who are looking for career advancement and causing them to leave, taking sometimes case inventories, sometimes personal brand, and a lot of early career energy to go after opportunities in their market. So that's a new sort of class of digital native competitors that are emerging within the market. So we're seeing all of these factors, and we also believe that people aren't necessarily reacting in the most sort of like fruitful way, and we see sort of like gaps in how people might approach this. And so what we have observed here are a couple of mental traps that we see law firms falling into, and I'll just highlight these briefly. The first is personal rivalries, because these are local businesses, and you're going to the same courthouse, the same judges, and the sort of same networks. Sometimes like people don't like each other, and they make decisions about their business based on those personal feelings, which is not how you really should be making business decisions. And we've seen this come to light where clients might want to buy billboard space across from their competitor's office in a low value place where you really don't need to be spending money on a billboard, primarily just to thumb their nose at their competitor, which is, serves its own purpose, but is not necessarily truly proactive in sort of like building the business that you want. The next is punching the biggest guy in prison is how we're talking about. We're seeing these larger regional and national players, and we see firms as these larger national players come into market reacting, and they want to fight against this new firm coming in, and they're mistaking this new firm as their direct competitor. And we'll talk about this in a moment. We have to define what competition is. But we've seen firms putting their competitors in their creative, like trying to paint them in a bad light, but they're putting their competitor on their billboard or in their radio ad, giving them effectively free brand awareness, because the nuance of the messaging does not come through to an audience. You're just giving your competitor earned media. So this is another thing of just like mistaking 800-pound gorillas as competitors and taking sort of flawed response. And then winner take all is actually, I think, the more subtle and most sinister version of this, of these mental traps, where you're seeing people spend more on broadcast TV. You want to spend more on broadcast TV because you want to be in the top 3, or you want to be on the top 3 of Google responses or auction insights with Google AdWords. You're bidding up the floor without knowing what your competitors are doing. So it creates a winner-take-all mentality that raises the equilibrium point to a point that's not profitable for a lot of firms. And sort of the anecdote I'd layer in here is, if anybody's seen A Beautiful Mind about John Nash, there's a scene about the formation of the Nash equilibrium, where they're all in a bar, and these economists, and they're looking at a group of beautiful women. One woman is more beautiful by conventional standards than the others, and they're all talking about how they want to take this woman home. And the Nash equilibrium states, if they all go after the one, they all lose. But if they all go after the friends, they all get dances that night, basically. And there's an element of seeing your competitive landscape that same way, where if you're trying to be the winner take all, you know, it's going to be a sort of loser, everyone loses sort of scenario. So focus on your strategy, not your ego. It's important in competition to think about it as centering on creating value, not beating rivalries. And so we developed this framework that we think is useful for our clients and lawyers to use to analyze how they think about their business. There's a two-step process of defining the competition and identifying gaps in the market that are sandwiched by strategic and financial considerations that you should make as a business. First, you want to define your competition. There's some helpful archetypes that we've developed, sort of small firms that are new, firms that have been around for a while that are kind of on the Mount Rushmore of your local market, firms that are well capitalized and sort of moving up in the market, firms that maybe a medical malpractice firm that's really focused on that niche. You want to map your competitive set. Who do you look like? And you want to think about that as your competition. Then you want to map the competition. In the 3 to 5 firms that are your core competitors, where do you see their brand show up? What networks are they a part of? What demographics are they speaking to? What's the message? Are they like fun or are they serious in how they come across on their website or their messaging? You want to be mapping these things and finding the gaps for your firm and how you define your own message. And then the other thing here is we did this survey last year on client journey, and we polled over 1,000 people. Only 50% of people roughly would contact an attorney after getting into an accident. Roughly 50% either would decidedly not, or they're not sure. So we find from this evidence that there's opportunity to grow the pie and go after an audience that may not have previously been inclined to hire an attorney and just aren't being spoken to or contacted in the right way. So we're getting into knife fights over 50% of the addressable population. So I'll close on this. You want to think about your firm strategically and establish a creative and objective mindset. Don't let emotion flow into your strategic decisions. Think about a long-term view of building a sustainable business. Think about the brand core you want to communicate that's authentic to you, and stick to that. Because the trade winds are going to shift, but you need to have a true sense of self as a company, and you need to establish that. Similarly, as you're doing this exercise of evaluating competition, you need to optimize for profitability. Be thinking about underserved markets and how you can run your firms operationally efficiently to create that profitability, because that's where true value creation comes in. It's not defeating rivalries, it's about creating value, and you only do that through being disciplined, not random acts of marketing, but marketing that is tied to your growth objectives and the authentic core that you've defined in your strategic planning. So with that, these are our services. We're a marketing firm. We do this to understand kind of the market in which we compete on behalf of our competitors. We have copies of the white paper and other literature out by the front desk. If a conversation about this topic or others, relevant to it are of interest to you, we'll be around and I'd be happy to have a conversation and discuss further. But thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Hopefully you found it interesting.